We've been talking a lot about race and racism in America, and it is something that permeates each day of the week, all 7 days of the week, but never is it seen more profoundly than on Sunday when we go into our houses of worship, and then when we turn around and we go into our places of business. To talk to me and you about this is my dear friend, Reverend Dr. Marvin King. He is the pastor of First Baptist Winchester. Marvin, always good to see you.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah. You and my husband and many others in the Winchester community have been actively trying to work through some of these issues with town halls and even having collective worship service, with all different denominations, all different races. How's that worked for you?
There have been a lot of challenges. I think that the biggest challenge is to get through our discomfort and preconceived notions and assumptions. It has never been more prevalent when we have joint worship services, how many different assumptions and filters and experiences we have that we bring to the religious table that we have to fight through to be able to share space without fear and without discomfort.
Do you think that it is in the manner that we worship, or is it in the music, or is it the call response that is so a part of the Black experience that causes the discomfort, or is it just race?
I would like to think that it would be some nuance to the style of worship that would cause the discomfort. But the more I am engaging with other churches that are not African American, I'm learning that it's not the style of music, it's not the style of the preaching, the call and response method or style. It is really a misunderstanding of one another as people. You'd be surprised how many people have asked me, I love to hear you speak. Would I be welcomed at your church?
Hmm.
And the interesting thing is, of course, yeah, I'm a pastor of a Christian church, and someone who's also a member of another Christian church would ask me, would you feel comfortable in the church? Well, that then is a deeper issue. I mean, for you to not feel comfortable in the church and you have supposedly the same faith or belief as I have, why would you not feel comfortable? So I think we have to ask ourselves these tough questions, as to why there's such a discomfort level. And I think a lot of it is just misunderstanding.
Is it also, and it goes both ways.
It
It's
does.
white to black, black to white.
Mhm.
Is it also too maybe that the church is a safe haven for those of color, a place to more freely express their anxiety, their struggle, their pain,
Yeah.
and they feel maybe that to have that exposed to the ones that they feel are doing the oppression is an
Mhm.
invasion, maybe?
Absolutely. And I think you've hit the nail on the head with what some of the feelings that we experience, in our contemporary culture. I think people, not knowing our history as a country and not knowing how racism has impacted even the religious experience, I think we do ourselves a gross injustice. So Sunday was the only time many slaves were able to freely express themselves. That particular psychological expression through worship has still permeated the Black community. So the Black church has been this place where all of the things that we deal with, the struggles, the anxieties, the stresses of life, all of those things are then expressed through the Black church experience. And it has been and is still a safe place, in the Black community, because when we look at our society, the Black church is still one of the central cornerstones of the African American community. So it is a place where people can really be free. And so when you see people come in who are not like them, it can feel like an invasion of space.
when we get through and push through Sunday to get ready for Monday
Mhm.
and put back on the suits and the ties and the heels and stockings and all these things, and we go into the workplace,
Mhm.
it's a whole nother experience. Sometimes you got to take that Bible with you to get you through that day.
That's right.
I know what it is. I know my struggle as a Black woman.
Mhm.
What is it to be a Black man in corporate America? Because there are all these constraints. It's not just doing the job, but it's
Mhm.
how you present, how you
Mhm.
look, how you can you shave your head and have, be bald and have face hair, or do you have to have a high and tight? Or there are
Yeah.
all these different things that we have to do. But
Yeah.
what does it feel like when you walk in there and you're the only one at that board table?
Mhm.
What is that like?
It is. There's not one word to describe that. But as African American men in corporate America, we live in a double consciousness. We live in this duality, if you will. There's a term that we use called code switching, where in order to be respected, in order to at least be heard, or at least to be a part of the corporate landscape, we have to begin to switch some of the characteristics that are inherently normal to the African American experience to assimilate into the corporate environment. And so the danger in that is that as a Black man, you know, there are identity issues that can come about, where you really don't know who you are, and you can't be authentically yourself, while everyone else in the corporate environment can be celebrated and championed for being themselves. As African American men, you sometimes you can't dress like everyone, you can't dress like you would want to dress. If you had dreads or cornrows in your head, that causes your white counterparts to feel some kind of way, because there are stigmas and stereotypes associated with those kind of cultural nuances. If I was in corporate America, I would not wear a beard. I would be clean shaven. There are certain, I would dress a certain way. I would definitely present myself in a certain way if I was back in corporate America, because that's what we had to do to survive. There are ways that we have to speak in a boardroom or in a meeting, or how we posture ourselves. Those are nuances we have to think about just to be in the environment. And those are stressors that I think sometimes, I'm not sure if our white counterparts have to think about them to the same degree, because any word that we speak, any mannerism that we demonstrate, anything that violates the unwritten corporate code can actually be an opportunity to can block an opportunity for us. And so we have to be very mindful how to navigate the corporate landscape. There are so many landmines that we navigate. And as an African American man, I was always thinking, am I safe here? It was corporate America was not always psychologically safe, because I was always thinking, what do they think of me? There was always this feeling, do I really belong here? Right. As I look and I'm one of the only ones in the workplace doing what I do I really belong here? Am I accepted here? And all of those questions of psychological safety. And then the last question is, do I really have a future here? Right? Am I being judged, by the color of my skin, or do people look at me as I'm some statistic to meet an affirmative action, requirement? I mean, there's so many nuances to the things that I was thinking when I was in corporate America. But the most important thing was, the stress of just surviving.
Did you feel like you were the token?
Um,
Or is that word not even right either? Because you had to be
mhm.
all these things in order to get your foot in the door anyway.
Absolutely. I think the thought about tokenism is, I always thought, do they think I'm the token? And so with that idea, I was always thinking, well, that thing that my mother told me in the talk, you got to be 10 times better than them just to get half the opportunity that they get. And so, despite how I got there, or despite what channels and roads I had to navigate to get there, I really wanted I wanted to prove that I'm just as good as you are, that I'm just as qualified and I can do the job just as good, if not better, as anyone else.
Will it ever change? Will it ever change? Will it ever come a time when your children and my child won't have all of these different landmines to jump, hurdles to jump over, and truly realize the dream that Dr. King always talked about, the other Dr. King?
That's right. That's right. I'm going to say that I think it will change. Um, I think to embrace a definitive that things will not change is to give up the fight. When history has shown us that although some things have stayed the same, there are a lot of things that have changed. We do have more access than we had in the 1960s and 70s. We do have more opportunities than we had in the 1980s. So although progress has been small, I think the conversations are being had that as we have established the groundwork to fight this fight, I think that what we will see in the next 20 years is this massive snowball to address racist systems and institutions in our country that perpetuate this oppressive mindset. And so I do think that it will quickly start changing. My concern is we're not prepared for how quick it is going to change. The fact that we're talking about taking down Confederate monuments and those symbols, the fact that you have the Southeastern Conference, athletic conference, talking about, taking the rebel flag out of, its institutions that make up the Southeastern Conference. The fact that NASCAR is talking, it has banned the Confederate flag. That is a very radical and quick shift. And my concern is that we as a culture are not prepared for the quick pivot and the question of where do we go from here? How do we now create systems of equity? And if you notice, I did not say equality, I said equity, because you cannot have equality until you first have equity. How do we deal with ownership in the minority communities and access to contracts? And how do we continue to build ownership in those communities in such a way that we can have equity, then talk about equality? Because right now there is no equity.
And that's when we'll have that liberty and justice for all, right?
That's correct.
Marvin King, thank you so very much for taking some time. Thank you for taking time to listen to our conversation on race. Until next time, I'm Dia Davidson.